Hello everyone, good morning, afternoon, or evening. Welcome to PAX Online. My name is Sara Winters, otherwise known as Division 10, and I'm going to be teaching you how to build a room escape at home today. So, for those of you who are completely unfamiliar with room escapes, this panel is going to teach you very briefly what they are, but then is going to jump right into how you can modify that for the home experience on a limited budget and obviously limited materials. So here's what we're going to cover for this entire panel. First, we're going to be covering what a room escape is and some terminology that I'm going to be using so that I don't have to keep stopping to explain what certain terminology means. We're going to be talking about some ways to adjust a room escape for home use. Common codes and ciphers, because this is a great way to add puzzle variety to an escape room when you don't have access to some of the advanced technology that the professional rooms do. Great physical puzzles that don't need special equipment or that need relatively inexpensive equipment that you might already own. And other ways to hide stuff in your house or designated area where you're going to be doing the room escape when you don't have the ability to just lock everything up inside of intricate puzzle boxes. Before we get into this, let me introduce myself. Like I said, my name is Sara Winters. I'm Division 10. I'm a cosplayer. I've been cosplaying for over 15 years, and a lot of those building skills actually helped me build room escapes. I discovered this actually just this morning when I was recording this panel. I'm actually the very first reference you see for room escapes on Wikipedia under an article I wrote in 2009. So if you want to see a horrible blast from the past, go check out Wikipedia. Apparently this article has been used as reference for the past 7 years, and I wasn't even aware. I also was a forum moderator for Telltale Games, and as someone who is blind, hence just the photo of me and not my lovely face talking, I don't own a video camera, and unfortunately I wouldn't be able to focus on it because I can't see where it is if it were pointed at me. So, surprise, even someone who's legally blind can build and make these escape games. Now, as far as actually, programming games, I don't have any experience. But I've been building and working with these for actual years because it's a fun thing to do and it's been a hobby of mine. I've always loved puzzles and figuring out how to get out of them. And me, as a hobbyist, being able to do this should say something about the capabilities of what you can do. Ultimately, building a home room escape is as big as your imagination will let it be. Even constrained within a pretty tight budget. With that being said, surprise! My gift to all of you and everybody at PAX Online. If you want to check out a room escape using a lot of the techniques that I'm going to be talking about during this panel, you can follow along, or because this one's designed to take a little bit longer, play it anytime during the week. It'll stay up. It's at https://sites, sites.google.com/view/conescape2020. The room escape is almost completely designed so that if you are visually impaired, you can play it. It is completely designed so that if you are hearing impaired or deaf, you can play it. Because as someone who is visually impaired myself, being able to play these games is important to me, so I wanted to make it as accessible as possible. Your screen reader should be able to pick up just about everything on here. There are unfortunately a few physical puzzles that would be very difficult to solve, but there is a hint function built right in, as well as a solve for me, which will provide the solution when you jump forward. I don't want anybody stuck. However, if you don't want the puzzles to solve for you, you can always @ me on Twitter for hints, and I will happily oblige. My Twitter will be up at the end, but it is @Division10. So let's jump right in and start with the basics of room escapes and common terms. Now, in that paper that was referenced on Wikipedia, I actually talk about the origins of room escapes. It's a little bit of back and forth between video games and real life influence each other in this really cool loop. So the start of room escapes really started with the games like Myst, Monkey Island, and late 80s, early 90s adventure games. This then transferred to one of the earliest web room escapes, of which I have an image on the screen, called the Crimson Room. From there, many other imitations followed. Early room escapes were mostly inexpensive or free flash games. A lot of them contained horror elements, although the Crimson Room did not. Its sequel, the Viridian Room, did. And many of them were very difficult to solve. Esoteric with what's called pixel hunting, where you'd have to click on an exact spot in an image in order to zoom in on the thing that you were looking for. These simple games inspired more complicated ones. On the screen, I have an image from 9 Hours, 9 Persons, 9 Doors, or 999, which leaned more heavily on the horror route, with quite a bit of blood and gore in its sequels, to, on the right, some of the lighter ends, the Layton games, which started very similarly to things like the Crimson Room, where it was just purely puzzle, and now with a story, but them very much segregated, to later Layton games, where the puzzles directly reference the story. In some cases, a puzzle might actually be unlocking a door that you were trying to escape from. How novel. These early games then influenced the first real-life escape rooms. I have a picture here of a very early room escape, which was simply that. It was a room with puzzles in it, and you had to escape from it. Except now, this was in real life in 3 dimensions, and you could physically rifle through the room. Someone would then have to reset it up for the next people to play, and so forth. More advanced games, like the sequels to 999 and Layton games, then influenced these, which then influenced escape rooms to the point where we have more modern escape rooms, second and third wave rooms, like the one that's here, which is based off of the Orient Express, which was actually escaping from a train while trying to figure out who a murderer was. These second and third wave escape rooms often include live actors. The puzzles may either lean easier, going for the adventure element, or much harder. Some escape rooms have joined escapes, where it's part of a larger story, and you place several rooms together that have a linking story. I know of one such place in New York City where there's 4 different rooms that you have to escape from that are different time periods that all combine to a 5th room that you can earn if you've successfully escaped from the other 4. And this will then round around to theming, which is extremely important in a home room escape, because it's very unlikely that anyone's going to believe that you're locked in someone's house. Obviously, you can let them out. So rather than doing that, when I make home room escapes, I try to lean in on a theme. For example, this piece here, this small prop that was made out of cut paper and a laser cutter that I have, which you may not, but a printed paper would work all the same, was for a Danganronpa themed escape room, where rather than trying to escape, you're actually trying to help the characters from Danganronpa escape their own place, even though you're far away. A lot of the puzzles there were involving relaying information back to a runner, or playing an online game against Monokuma, who was secretly playing from a completely different area, even though the participants, my friends, didn't realize that somebody else was actually helping me remotely. So I'm going to give you 2 terms. Again, as I said earlier, I used to be a volunteer moderator for Telltale, which meant that I actually helped with some small things throughout the company, which leads us to our second thing. And I'm doing that first for a reason. That second thing is called Rule of Threes. It comes from the adventure gaming genre, but it does apply to room escapes. And I like to use it in my games because it allows people to jump from puzzle to puzzle. It's the idea that things come in threes. Comedy also uses this rule. What's important here with the rule of threes is that let's say somebody's stuck on a puzzle. Well, what I try to do is I try to have 3 puzzles that are unlocked all at the same time, that then give you a piece to something else. So usually with 2 pieces you have enough information to move on, so you're not totally stuck. But if you're also stuck in a particular puzzle, you can go off and do something else, and then when you're fresh, come back to the other thing. The reason why I said that second is because the first terminology I have on here is called sequence breaking, and this is really important in room escapes. It's performing an action out of order, just as I did. Why this is important is that sequence breaking might cause people to skip entire sections of your room escape or puzzles, and this is bad because if someone's doing a room escape, if you're making a room escape for a friend, ideally you're making it for someone who wants to play a room escape. So the issue there then becomes they've missed a good chunk of what you're giving them. They've missed some really cool puzzles. So there are ways to prevent sequence breaking, and sometimes the inverse is true. Sometimes you may actually allow sequence breaking. If you try the online game that I've built, there is actually a completely skippable, very difficult puzzle. And why is it skippable? The game, if you have an actual real life object, you'll know when to use it. Yes, this is a virtual game. You'll know when to use it, and you can use it to completely skip a puzzle. Sequence breaking can also be avoided by telling people please don't use your cell phones, but normally I allow people to look up whatever they need on their phone, and I don't rely on the fact that I'm hiding common knowledge information from someone, like say a date of somebody's birth, like I might use that in a puzzle, or if it's a themed game, which most of mine are, information from the source material that they may not remember offhand that's important for a puzzle. I'm not going to assume that they just know it, nor am I going to hide that information within the game, because that's not fair. They can either sequence break and skip a puzzle, or they might find themselves backed into a corner, or they might not already know it, so they won't care. So by allowing them to look things up, I know that everybody's on an equal playing field, and I can focus on the actual puzzles and helping them escape. Ultimately, you're doing this because it's fun. So how are we going to adjust this experience for the home? Obviously, physical room escapes in areas where you're paying money per person in a physical space, they have the budget to build some really cool props and set pieces, hidden doors, or safes that open in unconventional ways, or things like that. The first thing is that I tell people not to try and break out. Like I said with the Danganronpa example, they weren't trying to escape the room so much as help someone else escape their room with their information. In this case, this was an Artemis Fowl escape that I made for a friend for their Christmas gift, and the actual puzzle was not to escape, but to find a safe that was hidden somewhere in the house, and then find the combination to the safe. Each of those were two sets of rule of 3 puzzles. One gave hints to the location. Adding up all the hints would give you where the safe was. The other set of clues gave you the actual combination to the lock, and in the form of some word puzzles for math that when you solved it would give you the combo. Inside was a present from the fairy people, aka a signed copy of Artemis Fowl, because my friend is a huge Artemis Fowl fan. And this I did accomplish by setting some ground rules. Here's a few things you can do. 1. If a puzzle is in an area that you cannot lock, you can simply say that only certain areas you're only allowed to explore certain areas unless another puzzle tells you otherwise. You can also tell people that puzzles aren't in certain rooms, such as the bathroom or the kitchen. This way they're not going to go hunting in there. You might also say that you start them off with a puzzle or a lockbox or a safe, which will then lead them to something else, and they're not supposed to go around looking for things unless a puzzle specifically tells them to do so. This way you can, say, keep people out of a pet's room, or prevent people from seeing something in a closet that you can't lock, and that will prevent people from sequence breaking. Again, these are your friends, they're not paying money, you're trying to have some fun. As the GM, they're trying to have some fun playing an escape room game. They're not going to intentionally try to break the room because you're not giving them a hard set and kicking them out if they don't finish in time. Unless you want to. But how do you hide stuff? There is something to do with the locks that you already have, regardless of their size. A bike lock could lock up a step ladder that prevents them from being able to get up on the top shelf of something, and something might be up there that they need. So a sequence of events might be find passcode to bike lock, open bike lock, get step ladder, or small step stool, or whatever, something ceremonial even, just to say that you can now go somewhere high, and now you can reach that thing on the high place that will lead you somewhere else. Other things that you might not realize that you can lock, but you can, mailboxes. In this case, on the left-hand side, I have a tiny little scrap of paper hidden inside of my emergency key lock. It was literally the size of a key, as well as the key to the mailbox hidden inside, which led to two more things. Maybe your patio locks. There are inexpensive safes you can purchase. Those are all things that can lock that you can use passcodes for. Letters, numeric, or in some cases, some might actually be symbol locks. There are some older Chinese locks that you can buy inexpensively on Amazon that use Chinese characters instead, so you can make drawing or symbol solving puzzles if you so choose. And as I mentioned before with my Danganronpa puzzle, this was true of the Artemis Fowl one as well. Enlisting outside help is essential in a lot of these room escapes. At the very least, you're going to have to act as GM, if not outright have an additional person. In my case, I usually have one other person, or it's just me if I've been able to set some stuff up, and be the hint giver as well. I try to do this in character. For the Artemis Fowl game, I had a friend on the phone who was pretending to be Foley, whose entire job was just to be a complete jerk to my friend during the entire room escape, taunting him for not solving puzzles. But in the background, he was also helping set up some of the things that were working remotely, which I will talk about later. Some of the remote games, as well as some of the electronics, because especially if you use modern electronics, you might be able to set them to turn on and off remotely. I mean, something even as basic as a TV with an image on it to something much more advanced. So, common codes and ciphers. These are great ways to hide things. Some of them are very simple, some of them are more complex, but I'm going to be going through all of the ones that are my favorites, as well as one that isn't, and why, so that you can use them in your rooms to add a little bit of spice and variety. The first and most common is a simple substitution cipher. There's a bunch of different ones that all substitute in different ways. @bash 1226 and Pigpen. Pigpen uses crosses that look kind of like tic-tac-toe boards to hide things. It's very familiar to a lot of people. Even if not, you can hide a solution there, but then again, you're worried about sequence breaking, so do you hide it, or do you let people try to search it up on the internet? A1226 is a lot more intuitive to people, where A equals 1, B equals 2, C equals 3, all the way to Z equals 26. This is a cipher that people can recognize immediately as soon as they realize that something is encoded. Most people would, even if they don't realize what the thing is, be able to input it in or take the time to translate. @bash, I'm always terrible with this one. I believe it's where H is Z, B is Y, and so forth. It's not one I use very often, but I'm aware that it's a substitution cipher. But my personal favorite is the one in the image in the bottom right, and this is an image cipher. This is where an image replaces a letter. This guarantees that someone can't sequence break because these images don't appear anywhere else. It could also be things like textures or shapes or even smells, where a different scented candle could represent a different letter. And you've got a series of scented candles somewhere in the room fixed in place, and then a listing, like a home coupon or a home guide of scented candles and what they mean somewhere else that someone could find. There's lots of different ways you could hide that kind of information, coded in plain sight. Next is another fun one. This is a Caesar cipher. This is where the one that you've seen with code wheels, where there's an inner wheel and an outer wheel, and these letters are fixed. So it's sort of like the A1, B2, C3, except that A might always be X, and B might always be Y, and C might always be Z. They're always shifted in some direction, either forward or back, but always in the same order. This is obviously a little bit trickier, but there are web apps that the minute that someone recognizes that something is a Caesar cipher, or even that it's, looks a little off, they can plug that directly in on the internet and have it changed. So it is a good way to add an extra step. Another option would be that you have the phrase somewhere and then you have the answer somewhere, like in Gravity Falls, where all of these images are coming from. 3 letters back lets you know to shift everything 3 letters backwards. So A shifted backwards 3 letters, looping around the internet, around the alphabet, would be X, because it would be A, Z, Y, X. B, A, Z, Y, so B would be Y, and so forth. Again, in a homeroom escape environment where people have a little bit more time, Caesar ciphers are great, especially if they have use of their cell phones. I am always terrible at pronouncing this. It's spelled Vigenere. I believe it's pronounced Vigenere, but I've always said it wrong every single time I've said it, but this is basically a Caesar cipher on steroids. I don't ever recommend and I've never seen this in a live room escape game. But for advanced puzzle solvers who want a more puzzle-heavy room, who want harder puzzles, this is a great one to include. It is a Caesar cipher where you need to build yourself an actual grid in order to solve what it is. Again, this is one that I would only recommend if the person that you're building this for is a seasoned puzzle solver who wants to take their time. Because even if they recognize that it is this kind of cipher, it takes a little while to decode. This is a fun one, though. This next one is one that I've invented, and I've used in quite a few of my rooms. Displayed on the screen is an image of the Phantom Thieves logo with, in the Phantom Thieves font, pairs of letters. I'm sure, and I've seen similar codes in existence before, but never quite like this, and I'd love to share this one with you. I call it code in pairs. It doesn't have a name. But essentially, there is a key letter. In this case, it was X, which they found from solving an entirely different puzzle, where if X appears in the beginning of the code pair, the letter that follows it is the letter that you need to use. So if it's XA, XY, the thing that you're looking for is just AY. But then, mixed in is a lot of things where the first letter isn't X, and then you ignore the entire pair. Again, this looks very tricky, but the minute that you know that you need to look at the X's, it's actually incredibly quick to solve, even quicker than substitution ciphers, because you're not substituting anything. You're just crossing out everything that doesn't exist. That doesn't make sense based on the clues that you're given. Obviously, you can separate it with something else, like I see the C, or another letter, or just using another code to get to this point. This one's great because it solves very fast once they know what they need to do, even on long, in this case quite long, final answers. And finally, I'm going to give you a cautionary word on real-life codes. Up on the screen is both Braille, American Braille, as well as Morse code. In many rooms that I've been to, I've actually found both. Morse code has 2 problems. It has an issue where obviously people who are deaf or have limited hearing cannot participate because it is an auditory puzzle. But to be fair, I am blind. There are some puzzles in escape rooms I can't do, and I have to understand that if there's a variety and mix of puzzles, there might be a puzzle that involves smell, there might be a puzzle that involves sound, and there are a lot of puzzles that involve sight. The second problem arises in when, like I mentioned before, sequence breaking, when somebody already knows these real world codes. Now, if you're building a room escape for a friend or someone you know, then you might know if they know these codes or not. Or you might know that they absolutely know these codes and be able to use it to your advantage by making, say, your own version of Morse code. But the reason why I warn people about this is a friend of mine went to an escape room that was nautical themed. Very early on, I'd say about 10 minutes into the escape room, they activated a trigger that activated a Morse code signal. That signal then repeated itself, just kept looping and looping and looping for the rest of the room escape. Your goal for the rest of the escape, because you weren't allowed to use cell phones and therefore could not look up outside information, your goal for the rest of the escape was to find pieces of paper that told you what each of the dashes and dots represented. The problem is that my friend was in the Navy and therefore already knew Morse code. The Morse code gave the exact answer to exit the room. They finished the room in 15 minutes, sequence breaking the entire rest of the game. The same is true with Braille and me. If there is a Braille puzzle in a room, it is immediately thrown in my hands. And when you're playing a room escape and you've got 50 million puzzles and you don't know how hard the rest of the room escape is, they're going to use any opportunity to skip a few puzzles. So it gets handed to me and I solve it immediately. Except one room I was in New York City, where I put my fingers on it, I read it, and it was absolute gibberish. What they'd done was they'd used the dots of Braille and actually turned it into junk. You still had to find the decoder for their version of Braille. It was pretty awesome. We couldn't sequence break even though I knew how to read it, because I didn't actually know how to read this version. So if you're going to use real life codes, such as Braille, or the Enigma code, or some very common anagrams, or Morse, or anything like that, either be aware if your person who's playing this room escape knows it already and use that to your advantage, or you can skip these types of things entirely. I would be very careful about using one of these if you think a person might or know it or not. So let's move on to some puzzle types other than just codes and ciphers that are really cool and very inexpensive to do. First and foremost are red eye puzzles. There's an image here of a very difficult to read puzzle. Now, what's interesting thing about red eye puzzles is that I believe even if you're colorblind, they work, because the red film, you just need to buy some very inexpensive red cellophane, blocks out the red, and then you're seeing the black text that's actually hidden underneath. The advantage to red eye puzzles, as you can see here of my friend who's wearing very stupid goggles on his face, is that, well, your friends will be wearing very stupid goggles on their face in order to solve this puzzle. It's always fun to get a photo of them while they're trying to solve these to show off later. And of course, if you're doing a themed game, having a pair of goggles or glasses or secret agent glasses, or in this case they were very high-tech goggles, to use to solve it, using a little bit of cardboard and ingenuity, is really cool. And in this case, the goggles actually weren't hidden. They were in plain sight the entire time. My friend just didn't know what they were for, because they were hidden in an entire pile of fairy junk left in the side of the room. Until he got this red eye puzzle, and he's like, oh man, I know I saw something that could help with that. You might also, hide that puzzle, hide the pair of goggles. If it's got a strap you can't open, attach that to a bike lock, and maybe that's what you need to solve. Or put it in a little inexpensive plastic case that needs to be unlocked, adding an extra puzzle in your set. This one, again, is not something I'd normally see in an escape room game, just because it takes quite a while to solve. Once you know how to solve it, it's pretty quick. It's not a hard puzzle, but it is a little bit time consuming filling in the boxes, because you physically will have to solve the entire thing in order for it to be useful. This is a puzzle that I made for a very early room escape I did, that was online for Guardians of the Galaxy, that incorporated several Guardians of the Galaxy songs, where when you separated them out by different colors would actually build you a QR code that would lead to the next item on the puzzle hunt. Again, this is much better if you have a little bit longer time to do it, because filling in one of these takes about 10 minutes, and obviously in a 60-minute room escape, spending 10 minutes on one puzzle is too long. There's always the old classic puzzles with messages, although you run into the risk, depending on the size of the pieces you use, that someone will solve it without having all of the pieces. But there's always ways to adjust the difficulty, either by putting things on fronts and backs of the puzzle so you don't know which side to do, removing the edges of a blank puzzle so that someone can't just solve it with the edges, not actually including all the pieces so that the message is on all the pieces that you do include, but you don't have all of them, so they're not sure when they're finished or not. There are definitely ways to make this more devious than simply solving a puzzle. Next, safecracking. This is always fun. As I mentioned earlier, you don't have to just give somebody the numbers or letters to the safe. You can give them clues that they have to earn in order to solve it. In this case, the safe, it may not be visible to see, but the answer to the safe was 136. And rather than getting 136 as answers, I actually gave 3 clues. The largest safe number is even. The safe combination has no duplicate numbers. And the numbers add to 10 and are ordered from smallest to largest. So that it does actually lead to more than one answer. It actually leads to 3 possible correct answers. But that's only 3 combinations that someone would have to enter. Next, where can you hide stuff even if you can't lock things? Now, obviously, I mentioned there's lots of things you can lock in your house, but there's some things that you have that aren't locks in this form of keys, but still actually act as barriers, preventing people from moving on to the next puzzle until they figure out how to open them. And you might be using one right now. Your computer or your cell phone. Using your own cell phone with an image hidden on the main screen, or a computer with an image hidden, or more information hidden when they unlock it, is a great way to hide some stuff. In this case, my friend had to open the computer as Artemis Fowl and had to remember Artemis Fowl's own computer password. Again, I assumed that he'd be able to look it up, so I gave him some hints, and of course he could use his phone. But just the fact of you actually having to crack open Artemis Fowl's computer with his own computer password was a pretty neat little touch. Not all puzzles need to be hard. Some of them can just be thematic. Some of them can be breathers. I do try to make it so that the easiest puzzles are at the beginning, escalating to harder ones later, as people get more familiar with doing the room escape. But I do like to include a few later game easy puzzles, just to reinforce the theme, or to give someone a breather, especially if the room escape is longer. Now, once this puzzle is cracked, he's got a QR code here. A different one than the other puzzle that I'd mentioned earlier. Because this, sorry. Once he opened the computer, there's another QR code here. This one led to a completely different puzzle line. However, when I do physical room escapes, I try to limit how much computer or internet related items there are. Otherwise, I just do a completely virtual one. If someone's coming to my house for a physical puzzle, I would like to provide as many physical manipulation puzzles as possible. Things that use props, things that use stuff in my house that they might have access to, unlocking things, opening things. Yes, there are a few internet puzzles just because, well, I'm one person and I am on a budget, so it is a good way to pad out and do some more interesting puzzles that I wouldn't otherwise be able to do. But I try to keep those to a minimum. But you can always hide puzzles in other games. That X marks the spot for the Phantom Thieves puzzle I mentioned earlier, that was actually solved by playing Pokemon Go, which in turn was solved by a bunch of hints relating to needing a cell phone. By playing Pokemon Go, my friend was traded a unknown, an X letter unknown, named Marks the Spot, which helped them crack that ransom note letter puzzle. Meanwhile, for Danganronpa, there was a puzzle where someone actually had to play Jackbox, specifically the All About You game in one of the party packs, and my hidden extra friend was playing online as Monokuma. Other ways to hide stuff is with invisible ink. They'll need something to unlock said invisible ink. If it's lemon juice, you need fire. And be careful. If you buy invisible ink pens, you'll need some kind of UV light to unlock them. Some black light. What's really cool if you're doing a sci-fi one, sci-fi puzzle, this is something I've discovered, is that the 10th Doctor screwdriver that's commercially available, which a lot of you nerds and me nerds might already have at home, the blue light of that screwdriver is actually a invisible ink decoder. So if you're doing any kind of science fiction themed escape, now this was Gravity Falls, and for those of you who are familiar, one of the main characters can jump through dimensions. So him having met the Doctor is not out of the question. So my friend actually had to find the 10th Doctor screwdriver to unlock some stuff that was hidden in the Gravity Falls journal in invisible ink. And that, in turn, was a code that they then had to solve. For invisible ink, because for those of you who can see it, it is a little bit difficult to see sometimes, especially if you write small. I do include a hard copy of the original paper that was encoded after I've seen that this person has, in fact, found all the tools necessary, just in case they're stuck, especially if the next message is hard to read. Other physical puzzles that can be made fairly on the cheap, and I'd like to thank Warple Machines, Warple Chainsword for this for this image. Their link is below for how they built this. Laser puzzles do in fact exist in real life. Obviously, crossing the beams won't hurt you. This is a standard home grade cat laser toy and a bunch of very small mirrors. But using a laser to unlock something is absolutely something you can do at home for relative inexpense. The only difference is, unlike, say, in a big budget escape room game, you might not own a sensor to be able to detect a light at the other end, but you're a GM, you'll notice when someone solved the puzzle, and be able to unlock the thing that is needed in order to move on. And I apologize, that sound was actually my printer. And this is important because a lot of modern printers can print remotely. So let's say you're doing a escape room where you're not trying to escape, very much like the Danganronpa one I mentioned earlier, but you're trying to help someone else escape, and you're passing messages back and forth. Well, you can use a home printer to facilitate this. A lot of printers have scan features, as well as remote printing from a cell phone. So let's say someone solves a puzzle and then scans it in. Well, you've seen that it was successfully scanned. They might have to unlock the computer, scan it in, and then, mysteriously, from wherever they don't know, they've received a brand new printout that will lead them to their next clue, which is from the people who are trapped wherever that you're trying to help. In reality, you're just triggering the print function from your cell phone when somebody does something. It is possible to trigger this function from various things in your computer, but I'm not expecting all of you to be master programmers, so clicking it manually when you see that someone solved the correct puzzle will still give them the desired effect, especially if you have a friend who's further away who they can't see actually managing this stuff for you. The very last thing is hiding stuff in food. This is always the best. I love doing this for a couple of reasons. One, especially in longer games, at some point somebody's going to be hungry, they're going to want to check the fridge. Well, they might see something in there, like a weird cake, or in this case, this was actually a s'mores chocolate bar with the next clue hidden inside that they had to smash open with a hammer. Well, they're going to see, stuff in the fridge and then close it and not pay it mind. So even though the fridge is an item that is probably not off bounds, there's no indication that that muffin that's sitting in the fridge is actually something that they need as a puzzle until they're told, oh yeah, rip open the muffin, or cut open the cake, or, break open the chocolate TARDIS with a hammer. So there's a fun physical puzzle involved. There's food involved, especially if you're a decent cook. And then, again, this isn't a hard puzzle so much as it is a thematic one. Now, it's been about 45 minutes. I finished a little early. I know I still have 15 minutes to go, but I am in the stream chat. I'm Division 10. I am on Twitter. If you have any questions for me, I will take them for the next 15 minutes until the next presentation is going. And also, please feel free. Again, it's https://sites.google.com/view/conescape2020 if you want to play. It's totally free. It's going to use a lot of the skills that we've learned here today. Feel free to use the puzzles that I've included in this escape room for your own games. And let me know if you've escaped and how many hints you needed. I did get the puzzles beta tested by friends on my puzzle solving server, but it's always good to know how much hints people needed to solve these, because obviously beta testing a lot of these things are hard, especially when we're so far apart from each other. Anyway, my name again is Sara Winters, Division 10. Thank you so much for joining me at this PAX Online. I will stay on the line and answer any questions that you have. And otherwise, have a wonderful rest of your week.